Well, our next panel discussion is an exploration into the ideas of design principles that are driving the next era of green urbanism. Lessons in Visionary Green Urbanism is the title of this panel discussion, and truly looks at the visionary cities and what they're doing to embed nature, resilience, and people-first thinking into their urban fabric. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you to our panel discussions today that will be led by Steve Velegrinis, the design director of GENSLER. Give him a hand, he's a good friend of mine. Steve, thank you for, you have been a very busy guy in the last couple of weeks. My goodness, nice to see you. And joining him in the panel discussion today, we have Pauline Noujaim, the head of department, associate director at WSP, all the way from Riyadh. Pauline, thank you so much. We have Claudia, the head of landscape design at Studio E, and an advocate for sustainability. You'll see what I mean. We have Sebastien Miller, the design manager at Masdar City. Sebastien, great to have you with us. And we have Phil Dunn, the senior manager at Terra, part of Expo City, Dubai. Phil, good to have you with us today. That's fantastic. And Ahmed Tawakol, the head of urban design and landscape so thank you guys. Thank you so much for joining us at U+A. Thank you, Tawak. Phil, Steve, leave it to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Phil, for the intro. Thank you to the panelists for joining. Thank you for being here, everyone. Thank you to Rasmus for giving us a sort of rousing entry to a discussion about green urbanism. I think this discussion is a very important one, and one that's dear to all of our hearts. One of the most central questions is actually, though, what is green urbanism? I think Rasmus gave some amazing examples, but is a park green urbanism? Is a building covered in a forest green urbanism? What exactly is it that we talk about when we speak about green urbanism? It's a pretty broad and difficult question, but it's a question we have to kind of answer for ourselves in a way, perhaps to also expand the conceptual scope of what green urbanism is. So I think probably just to open up the conversation, I want to invite you all to tell me, in your perspective, what is green urbanism? So maybe, Pauline, if you want to start off.
Perfect, yeah, thank you, Stephen. Actually, it's not one element alone, but it's more that holistic approach when we talk about green urbanism, which main components or pillars is, first of all, nature. We need really to understand the site context we're dealing with. We need to know the people, the needs and the aspiration of the people. And the third pillar is actually the infrastructure or the approach, and this is where we come in. And when we put all these three together, it's not necessarily the end product or the landscape that we're going to offer. It's going to be a highly manicured landscape. But it could be as just simple as listening to the nature, providing the necessary and not over-designing. And I can give you a small example. One of the best places we like to visit in Riyadh is actually Wadi Hanifa, which is one of the natural element river that runs through the whole Riyadh. It stretches along 120 kilometers. And it's just amazing because the engineering work and the manufacture, the man-made intervention is really super minimal, and it's completely blended with the riverbed. So, and all the activation happen within that bed. So people are completely involved in that area. And the best part of it, it's for all age group. It's to be used most part of the year. And the best part is that when we have heavy precipitation, the river is reclaimed back by the riverbed. The flood reclaims back that river. So this is a great example how we can design with nature and for the people while delivering the exactly necessary safety for people to be able to live in that area. So, yeah.
Claudia.
I'll just talk. So let's see it more from a planning side. I think green urbanism is when you start a master plan or retrofit, you take the natural givings first. So you first look at the site, you look at simple things like existing vegetation, watershed, any kind of biodiversity existing, and this is the base of your site. So you actually plant your buildings inside the landscape, and not the landscape after the buildings. So you don't look first at GFA, traffic, infrastructure, but you really take landscape as space, and you keep this throughout the master plan, or try to retrofit it to maximize that in urbanism.
Thank you. I think the question also, you need to figure out what part of the process in terms of landscape design you're thinking of. For me, I really like the landscape planning point of view, where you're working hand in hand with the master planning. So for me, green urbanism is very much about making sure people have access to green spaces, which would come through, mixed use, medium density developments, ideally. Also getting public open spaces, getting our parks to do double duty in terms of flood mitigation, in terms of, where infrastructure goes. That green infrastructure, to me, that's critically important. And that's even before you've even got to the design process.
Hello. I'm going to keep mine really short. I like to think maybe it's not nature in cities, but it's cities in nature.
Thank you. Ahmed.
Thanks, Stephen. I think green urbanism starts by not thinking green as a color. I think everything on a master plan or a plan of a city has a color. And once we put all the colors, whatever is white on that plan, only when we see it that way, as an urbanism, this is what actually a green urbanism is. It's about inclusivity. It's about allowing everybody to be in. It's about integrating nature and the city. It's about understanding processes rather than pattern, rather than green, rather than a shape, rather than a species only. But it is rather whatever approach you want to apply to connect all these colors to the white. Actually, green urbanism can include in it an entertainment, and should include entertainment, include a healthy living, include a fitness track, include a biodiversity. So I believe once we see the green as a more broader term, then it is a green urbanism or environmental urbanism rather than just the green color.
So I guess the question is then, is green good in an arid climate?
Excuse me? Is what?
Is green good in an arid climate?
Green is good everywhere, but if we only think green, we are excluding so much from the environment. One of the most fascinating researches I came across maybe 25 years ago when I was at University of Massachusetts was a research paper by a well-known agriculture and landscape university in Israel, analyzing the borderline between Sinai Desert and the Negev Desert. Both are yellow, in fact. But the analysis was about how measurements was taken in the Negev side has implemented more restriction on Bedouins herding their cattle across the desert, has led to the fact that there is a crust of a micro environment or a micro ecology occurs on the desert sand itself versus the Egyptian border, which has a different color of yellow. And that crust, that shade of yellowness, is what allows greenery to occur, because it absorbs, it allows for a certain bacteria that allows for absorption of more moisture that makes the fertility of that soil much better once the chance occurs. So in a nutshell, green is not necessarily all what we aspire for. It's perhaps the prerequisite of the green that we should be thinking about.
Okay. Well, I think there's also, and a lot of people we've sort of talked through today, examples of green urbanism, and I think we have on stage with us, we're fortunate to have some people involved in some of those landmark projects. So projects like Sustainable City or Masdar or Terra. I might invite, and perhaps Phil, you can start us off. What have you learnt from your experience at Sustainable City?
Well, thanks, Steve. The Sustainable City, for those of you who don't know about it, is a development in Dubai. It's around 500 villas. It's around 46 hectares. Really interesting project. I haven't worked at Sustainable City for a while. I'd like to switch the conversation a little bit to Expo City.
Please do.
Just to sort of talk about what I'm doing now at Terra. So for those of you, raise your hand if you were at Expo 2020 and visited Terra before. Okay, wow, amazing, that's great. So lots of you know about Terra already, but Terra was formerly the Sustainability Pavilion at Expo 2020. It is an amazing facility, and I'm just going to go through a few of the I'm going to go through some of the nature-based solutions that are applied there very quickly because I know we don't have a lot of time. Essentially, really working with nature has done a lot for that building. So we have a reed bed that filters all the black water, 20,000 liters a day through these Phragmites reeds. We have two green roofs that extend up onto the roof, which mimic the perennial grasslands that were the predominant vegetation style here 130,000 years ago. We have our canopy with 8,000 square meters of solar panel that is mimicked after the gaff tree. It collects the predominant breezes, it brings it down into the courtyard below. The hot air rises up through the oculus. We have predominantly native plants in our landscape that surrounds us. Again, really accenting that idea that native plants attract native fauna as well. So all these things come together. Nature's been around for 3.8 billion years. I think that there's so much to learn from her. She's our greatest teacher, and she solved all of our problems in so many ways. We just need to look to those solutions and start to mimic them, start to implement them to really work with nature to change the trajectory that we're on today.
Speaking of projects that have spent a lot of time exploring green urbanism, Seb, you've been involved in Masdar City for some years now. What would you say are the biggest sort of learning points from Masdar City?
In terms of Masdar, I think the biggest thing that's often overlooked, again, comes back down to the master planning, is our master plan is orientated towards the grid, towards the prevailing wind conditions. So we always, and even in summer, we're always getting a breeze coming through the city. It's not blocked by streets, it's not blocked by architecture or urban forms, and that's got the ability to shave a couple of degrees off through the humidity. So that perceived heat that you will get in other places just disappears at Masdar, or is reduced to some extent, which again makes it a more walkable, it encourages people to go out to the park. So I think anyone here who comes from a master planning background, I'd say please, and you know, like Phil said, work with nature. It sort of seems ludicrous that we're ignoring, you know, some very fundamental lessons that are quite evident. But when we come to sort of on-the-ground solutions, like one of the ones we've been excited about, which we're doing, is agrivoltaics. So essentially that's solar PV and agriculture as well, because for Masdar City we have to, as a minimum, have 70% of our park powered from renewables, which is typically solar PV. So we look to, you know, how do we embed the solar PV units within the park? That could either be done through shade structures where people are walking. That could potentially be done through to car parking areas where people are arriving. And one of the ones we've looked at and we've just about to launch is agrivoltaic. So we'll have agriculture, community plots for the people that live in apartments. And then there's a mutual benefit. Essentially, you're getting two land uses out of one. So you're getting power generation, and then that is shading the agricultural plots. And there's that symbiotic relationship where essentially it's, again, a couple of degrees cooler, which enables the solar PV to function better. So successes like that we're looking at.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like experimentation in both Terra and Masdar, continual experimentation is really important. I might also move that sort of idea along and think about, ask the question, or pose the question, that if we're thinking about sustainability and green urbanism, how do we make it fundamental? How do we ensure that it doesn't get value engineered out? That seems a common challenge that many people have talked to us about. You know, how do we make it integral? Open it up to anyone who wants to answer that one.
Okay. Look, working in any developer or in any project, there'll always be pressure to erode landscape further. Look, and I think we're preaching to the converted here to some degree. We are professionals in the sense that we all understand the value that landscape architecture and good, well-designed spaces bring. But I think one of the roles we also have to play is sort of a custodian or guardian of open space. So one of the ways I always look to do that is make sure that landscapes are doing double duty. And I was sort of hinting on that before. Make sure that if you're thinking about drainage and stormwater resilience, yes, that could all be taken up by having much larger infrastructure pipes, but that comes at a capex cost and a concrete cost, which basically means a carbon cost. Alternatively, again, work with nature, look at how open spaces can infiltrate groundwater, look at how they can be used as retention basins, look at how you can create moments where the landscape is slightly different in terms of the topography. And then when someone comes along and says, look, we need to value engineer this, we need to potentially, take this component out. It's well, actually, you're pulling on a thread there and the whole jumper is going to essentially fall apart, because that is not just a green space, that is everything related to mobility or to drainage or sustainable urban drainage, etc. That's one way.
I can add into this, actually, if I may. I think one of the main aspects to not get value engineered is when we start having a landscape that is active landscape. Any landscape that is programmed rather than just functioning, a single function, as you were saying, other than just being environmental. If it is linked to a people activity, to a day-to-day use, to an experience, to an active program of any sort, being it an active nursery in the middle of the city, or a playground field, or an experimental. I love the previous presentation about people taking their kids to see insects close. This is the ones that are less likely to be value engineered, in my opinion, because it will have a demand. It will have the support, actually, of a human use beside doing its function as an environmentally important part of the landscape in a city or a development.
Absolutely, and I think Claudia.
Yeah, and of course, if you work with a developer, you can simply also, by research, show that developments with green have much higher value in house prices. This is it's a stupid kind of argument, but this is also how you get the money guys on your side to actually say, look, that villa, you can sell it for so much more money, because people really like looking at green space, like having active space, like having playgrounds next to you. So that is really a seller as well.
I would like to point Diriyah development, and more specifically the Diriyah right now that sits in Turef region. Impressingly, that area is not that green, but that area is really receiving a lot of visitors from local and international, just to witness that space and to live the experience, which is actually based, and this is part of the landscape and part of the value engineering, where we don't see much greenery, but we see a place that is alive because it's built on the cultural and heritage of that area. So just by being there, you see there's a combination of majorly hardscape, some built environment that has been renovated, but there is also the landscape approach that takes the visitor through that journey of discovering the culture and the history. So we've got to witness with the landscape and smart strategies they're using. You've got to witness what happened in that specific era of time, the defeat of a nation, and then you celebrate with them through the storytelling and the different moments you witness. You celebrate with them the nation of a new history, the new Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So it's just an example that is built on the nature, on the culture and the heritage, and it's not necessarily that it should be fully green to attract people. It's just working again holistically with this approach, nature and people.
Yeah, I think there was a couple of things mentioned there that we're talking about things like programming and movement and how they become essential parts of the urban experience. And I think, Claudia, in our discussions before the panel, you were bringing up mobility and transportation and how significant that is. How realistic is it that we make those fundamental integral green spaces that provide for non-motorised transport, and how reasonable is it that we do it in this region? What's been your experience?
For mobility, sorry, I mean, I always say in Europe you can't go outside half of the year because it's too cold. So here you have the vice versa, you know, because it's too hot. I'm a keen cyclist, so I lived in London when no one was cycling, and I was, you know, everybody was like, "You're crazy, you're cycling, it's snowing outside." You know, literally 5 years later, everybody was cycling. So I think you see it already here. I was this morning at the Corniche, I stayed here last night. I saw so many people on scooters, on bikes, walking, and they use it mainly here for leisure. But actually, you can bring this in, you know, to go to work, to go, you know, like short trips, especially, I think, in communities. It's difficult for more far distance, but in communities, if you can do short trips on a scooter, short trips by walk, that means you save space from the road. That means you can get more trees. That means you can get more shading, and then you can actually have that microclimate that maybe helps you to bring, you know, this component into the city. And maybe in the really hot summer months, you find an alternative program where you say, okay, everybody who uses scooter, we have a communal bus, you put the scooter on there, we drive you to work, you only do a short distance. So there's always other measures than just building. There's also smart thinking.
We're sort of, this is such an interesting topic. We sort of want to continue on with this, but we're going to run out of time pretty quickly. So I'm going to sort of leave an open leading question for everyone to answer. And it's basically, if you, as designers and professionals, had the opportunity to change one thing about urbanism, one thing in your projects, what would it be to advance the idea of green urbanism? Perhaps, Ahmed, if we can start at your end of the panel.
I think if we start to think that it's not just green, it's actually the colors of the environment, and it can has much more shades in it, and the environment also includes human activity. I would say an undisturbed patch of desert is probably more environmentally benefiting us than a golf course. Similarly, maybe an active patch of undisturbed desert that has a succession of multi-environmental native plants with a variety of gray and blue and green might be much more beneficial than just a patch of lawn, etc., etc. So once we start to see it that way, and how we, as designers, bring people to be really in love and in touch and engaged with those colors, I think that can change a lot of things for us.
I second what you say in so many ways. I just want to tie a little bit back to what Rasmus said in his talk around the 140 parks that were in Abu Dhabi. I think that the power of good urban planning, landscape architecture, and adding a social network into a city is so important. So I would say the one thing to focus on is connection, and not connection. I'm not talking about connection with mobility. I'm talking about connection, getting people out walking, the sikas, going to the parks, meeting your people in your neighborhood, the people that you meet when you're walking down the street, and creating those connections back to each other. I think maybe we're not in a climate crisis, we're in a disconnection crisis, and we become so disconnected from ourselves, from each other, from nature. If we start cleaning up our house with ourselves, then each other, we can focus on nature, and that would be the way to push forward with the perfect urban planning and greening of our cities.
I think one of the things I'd like to see from the profession is that sometimes we should be a little bit more ambitious in what landscape can be as a for pilot projects or new initiatives. Like, we do this at Masdar. We're able to try new technologies or university research or work with startups. And as a pilot, sometimes they succeed, sometimes they don't, but there's always lessons learned. We're always able to go back and refine and adapt and evolve. I'll give you one example, is we were doing a couple of years back some rammed earth, which was right after the Expo actually. And we were able to refine this within a landscape element, but then in terms of the mix, getting the right soils, the right grains from various emirates, get the ADM approval. And that actually was a springboard to something much bigger. It ended up actually being used for one of our recent mosque projects that opened. But that could not have happened if you did not have landscape as a springboard to enable that. So I think sometimes landscape should also be used for pilots and initiatives.
I think for me mainly is accessibility for biodiversity, basically that actually everybody can enter, open spaces, everybody can experience open spaces. There's no limitations between where plots are squeezed together. So again, that comes also back to mobility, so that literally then also we can experience that space and can connect as community.
Actually, for me, it's very important to understand, first of all, the context and not jump directly due to the challenges that we have, the tight time frame, etc., to jump into a design. Just really understand our context, because each site has its own specificity, and listen to the people. What would people like to have in that specific area? And green is just a mindset. It's not a color. So let's build on the context we're in and enjoy the scenery that we have in this region. Yeah.
Well, I think we can all probably heartily agree there'll be a lot of sympathy for these sorts of ideas if we can think of cities as nature, as the things that we do, the things that we talk about, not as city is one thing and nature is another. Then we get towards a true sort of nature-based system of seeing cities as nature, where rather than being part of the problem, we're part of the solution. And so I just want to point out, we made it exactly on time, perfectly, didn't overrun at all. But thank you very much, everyone, for a great panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much, guys. It's almost like you just continue to sit here until I give you a gift. Is it? Okay, so this is a very special selection today from our platinum partners, Innovo. It's selected because I really believe that Steve has got such a sweet tooth that he'll enjoy this. And so we have chocolates today from Innovo. But they did say, Steve, if you want more chocolates, to just go and visit them. All right? So can you pass these out to the guys? Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Well deserved chocolate.